Hey everybody, this is Mr. Levington here giving you your second day on the elimination method in solving systems of equations. So what I have here is a problem that you would have received that's similar to what Miss Kinsinger would have shared with you guys in the 7.3 lesson. And then this is going to be the new, slightly more challenging direction in the 7.4 lesson that we are going to be doing today. So in our previous lesson, what your goal was to find is to find the coefficients that matched each other that had the same number but the opposite sign. And that's because what you're going to do is you're going to add both of the equations together, and then you're going to either eliminate, or some of you might say cancel, some of you might say cross out the variable so that you can narrow it down to 1. Now, after you cancel these two out, you're going to add these two together, and then you're going to get 3y plus 1y, which is 4y. On the right side, you're also going to add the numbers together, and that is going to give you 24. And then it's just usually one easy step where you have to divide by 4, and then you have the value for your first variable. In this case, 24 divided by 4 is equal to 6. Then the second step that she had you guys do was taking that number and then plugging it back into one of these equations. I'm going to pick the second one just because I don't really want to deal too much with multiplication. Over here, I'm going to write down the equation with the negative 2x, and then I'm going to substitute or plug in, or whatever word you use, to put in a number for y. In this case, I'm going to just go ahead and multiply 6 by 1, because again, I'm replacing the y with 6, and then I'm just simply solving for the x variable. And then my final answer is when I'm able to fill in both of the values below. So over here, I'm going to go ahead and multiply 6 by 1. That gives me negative 2x plus 6 equals 4. And then it's just a two-step equation from there. So I'm going to subtract 6 from both sides. And then I'm going to divide by negative 2, which is the coefficient of the variable. Remember, coefficient is the number next to the variable. And then finally, at the very end, I'm going to get x is equal to 1. And then that is my solution, 1 comma 6. So in 7.4, things are going to be slightly different because if you'll notice, we can't just cancel out these two coefficients. And that's simply because they don't have the same number and they don't have the opposite sign. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to be able to get these so that they match, and also so that they have the opposite sign. One needs to be positive, one needs to be negative. The way you do that is you identify the first two numbers in the system and make sure they're attached to the same variable, and we're going to multiply them both by the opposite number. So since we have a 3 in the opposite equation, I'm going to multiply everything by 3. And then on the bottom, I'm going to multiply everything by 4. Since both of these equations have the same sign, I'm going to multiply one of them by a negative. Just to make things easier on myself, I'm going to multiply the top by negative 3. That way I know all three of these numbers can change signs. So let's go 1, 2, and then all the way over to our last number 2. Make sure you multiply every number that's in the equation. And then we're going to transform the equation. So now on the bottom, we're going to write down a brand new system. And we'll start by multiplying the top, which gives us negative 3 times 4 gives me negative 12x. Then negative 3 times 2y gives me negative 6x, or excuse me, negative 6y. And then negative 3 times 14 gives me negative 42. On the bottom, I'll get 12x again, which is a good sign because I want them to match up. And then I have negative 20y. And then I have 4 times negative 22, which is negative 88. After you get to this point, what you need to make sure is that since they are going to have the same number and the opposite sign, that they cancel out when you add them together. And then I have to add the other two numbers together. Negative 6y plus negative 20y gives me negative 26y. And then on the right side, I have negative 130. 42 plus 88, but they have the same sign, so you add those together. After that, what I'm going to do, once again, is just divide both sides by negative 26. Okay, and at this point, what I will do is just go ahead and make sure I use my calculator. And I'm just doing this off screen, but use the graphing calculator if you want to do that. So 130 divided by 26, I believe, gives me 5. And then now I have to pick an equation to plug it back into in order to get the x variable. Now, this is your choice. You can either take the y and plug it into your transformed equations that you just created by multiplying by the opposite coefficient, or you can take the 5 and plug it back in the original one. It's usually easier to plug it back into the original equations just because the numbers are smaller. So I'm going to plug the 5 into let's go with the first equation since everything's positive. So I'm going to write down 4x plus 2 times 5, remember y equals 5, equal 14. Then what I'm going to do is multiply 2 and 5 together, so that gives me 10. And then once again, it's a two-step equation. So what you're going to be doing here, let me zoom in a little bit, is you're going to go ahead and you're going to subtract 10 from both sides. And then you get 4x is equal to 4, which means you divide by 4, and then you get x is equal to 1, which means that our solution to the system of equations is going to be 1, 5. You have found the solution to the system, remember, once you have found both the x and the y variable. So we've added in basically one extra step when you have the different coefficients, which means you have to always multiply by the opposite number. Make sure that one of them is negative in the end, because that is a big mistake that most people make. So let's move to a second example. In example 2, this time what I'm going to choose to do is eliminate the y variable versus the x variable, just to show you guys something that's a little bit different. So once again, what we're going to do is find the opposite coefficients, and we're going to multiply both equations by them. So the bottom is going to be multiplied by 3, and then the top one is going to be multiplied by 2. What's important to note here is that the first coefficient is already negative, which means that we don't need to multiply the equation itself by a negative number. That will eventually eliminate itself because we already have a negative in front of the 3. So let's go ahead and transform the top equation first by multiplying everything by 2. So on the top, we're going to get 10x minus 6y is equal to 74. On the bottom, we'll have 9x plus 6y is equal to 21. Now, as you can see here, we have the same number but the opposite coefficient. Same coefficient but the opposite sign for the y variable, which means that we can go ahead and cancel them out. And then we have 19x on the right side is equal to 95 on the right side. At this point, what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and divide 95 by 19. So go ahead and take your calculator and take a second to do that. Okay, so you guys all should have used your calculator to make this calculation at this point. So now we're going to get x is equal to 5. And now what we want to do is go ahead and plug this back into one of the equations. You can pick either one that you want, but I'm going to pick the second one since it's a little bit easier with it being all positive numbers. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that 3 times 5 instead of x plus 2y is equal to 7. After that, we're going to multiply 3 and 5 together, which gives me 15, and then we have 2y is equal to 7. And then once again, it is just a two-step equation. Now, at this point, what's important to remember is that you're going to start by subtracting the 15 from both sides. So whenever the variable is not quite in the spot where you like it to be, I always like to put a little box around it. And that tells me that I'm going to deal with it last. Now what I'm going to do is subtract 15 from both sides. And then on the left side, these two are going to cancel. I'm going to bring down the 2y. And then 7 minus 15 gives me negative 8. Now, at the very end here, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and divide both sides by 2. And then that will give me y is equal to negative 4. And there you have it. You have just solved for your solution to both of the systems of equations. And we're done. That's it for both of the examples that we're working with today. So you've seen an example where you cancel out the x or the y variable, and you have also seen an example where we have to multiply by a number that's negative and a number that is not negative. So take care, everybody, and I look forward to seeing everyone's work, and make sure that you ask us for questions if you need help on the elimination method. So this has been Elimination Day 2. And once again, take care, everybody.